First things first, I want to point out that Nintendo's patent on the Power Warp case has been rejected by Japan's patent office for, get this, lacking originality. Also, before we dive in, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. We're on the road to 5K and your support is greatly appreciated. Honestly, this is just great news because the whole situation has been such a blatant overstep on Nintendo's part, so I'm glad there's someone left who's willing to tell them no. I'm also happy that the grounds of the rejection was lacking an inventive step. They're basically saying you need to invent something. You can't just take something that already exists and put a patent on it. Throwing an object at a creature in order to catch it is called fishing. Nintendo didn't invent that. They've been handling this situation so poorly that the final outcome just might be more scrutiny being placed on companies who try to file patents on game mechanics. It reminds me of when EA got so greedy with loot boxes in Star Wars Battlefront 2 that basically any game that came after it with loot boxes got immediately criticized, and the FTC even got involved. Likewise, Nintendo's recklessness here just might destroy both theirs and any other company's prospects of patent trolling in the future. I understand that a lot of this was self-imposed. Pocket Pair knew exactly what they were getting themselves into when they designed their game and the PAL designs, which flew dangerously close to the sun. But Power World still has a right to exist, and just because it rocked Nintendo's boat, that doesn't mean they should be rewarded with a lawsuit for doing so. I'm not too stoked about this lawsuit being filed in the first place, but of all times for it to be going on, I'm glad it's now. I mean, win or lose, it wouldn't have been a good look for Nintendo, but had this occurred in like 2021 when Nintendo was generally in everyone's good graces, the outcome likely wouldn't be much different from their other lawsuits, which were still ridiculous by the way. But having this unfold now, while the disdain for both Pokemon and Nintendo are at an all-time high, means the consequences for their lawsuits will affect their public perception much more than it has previously. With their current reputation, winning the lawsuit likely means a boycott, but like an actual boycott because so many people are already fed up with them, and losing the lawsuit not only looks bad from an ego standpoint, but also proves that they're not above abusing the law solely for profit. And it is just for profit. One look at Pokémon ZA is all the proof you need to understand where Nintendo's priorities are, which perfectly leads into today's topic for discussion about the absolute state of Nintendo's fandom. I don't think it's much of a hot take to say that Pokémon ZA is a complete disaster of a game, and if I were to sum it up in as few words as possible, it'd be 2015 Unity fan game. It lacks content, it runs poorly, it's weak to flying types, and its redeeming qualities have been done better elsewhere. Unacceptable for an indie title, never mind Pokemon, given not only how much money they rake in, but also the series' legacy. As someone who's never really been into Pokemon, when I look at ZA, I see a fan game from 2015 in its earliest stages of development. Do you remember that Unity Mario 64 fan game that Nintendo took down? That's Pokemon ZA's real competition. Pocket Pair is totally out of their league, but what's more shocking than the game itself has been the fan response to both the game and those criticizing it. And while this topic really extends to anybody defending the Switch 2's output in 2025, Pokemon's particularly offensive Switch 2 debut made it clear that now's as good a time as ever to talk about this. As far back as I can remember, being a fan of a franchise meant staying up to date on news, discussing previous games with fellow fans, as well as criticizing the franchise's shortcomings. But the release of Pokemon ZA follows a course that began with Scarlet and Violet, where glaring flaws are overlooked and mediocrity is not only tolerated and rewarded, but outright defended for the simple fact that a terrible game has a skin of your favorite franchise stretched over it. That's not to say that ZA is bereft of charm, and if you enjoy the game in spite of itself, that's one thing. But a handful of charming moments, a good game that does not make. The game lacks voice acting again, the environments are repetitive, the tutorial drags on for an agonizingly long time, especially early on, the game is buggy, which at one point was considered unusual, and the graphics were outdone by the Sega Saturn, never mind the PS1. The amount of environmental detail rendered here is more than possible on the Saturn, with the resolution being the only graphical edge, but I'd argue that the resolution hurts Pokemon because it would actually look better if the resolution were lower. There's really no excuse for how this game looks graphically. The Smash Ultimate stage background has model arches over the doors, and you play on quite literally 10% of the stage's rendered geometry, and you can only see around 30% of it up close. Yet despite these issues, fans rush to defend it because, come on, it's Pokemon, gotta catch 'em all, right? Remember the good old days of catching Pokemon? Don't you love Pokemon? Of course you do! Everyone loves Pokemon, the good times never stop, they're right here! Relive your nostalgia now for the low price of $70. Still not over that price tag yet, and I never will be, but I'm glad we're past the point of all negative criticism being labeled as rage bait and grifting. It's too bad that it had to happen this way, but enough people have been burned by Nintendo to the point where criticism is being received well and productive conversations are finally being had. In fact, many Nintendo-centric creators who have been ignoring these problems and promoting these products as if nothing's wrong have been reporting lower view counts, and that combined with the popularization of videos calling out Nintendo's bad practices, which has been extended beyond just the company and games media, but now even some of the influencers defending them are catching some of the heat, painting a clear picture of how many in the gaming community are feeling. But despite the glaring disconnect between product quality, critical ratings, and user reception, you'll of course still have fans reminding you of the disingenuous news headlines they googled seconds before pasting it in the comments of this video, continuing the crusade of corporate, critical, and commercial success TM. And to those people, I have to ask, did you get into Pokemon just because it was popular and sold well? Not because it interested you, not because others were playing it, but just based on the review scores? Because it seems like these people's enjoyment of the game is nearly, if not entirely, dependent on whether other people enjoy the game. I'll be honest, some of my favorite games are rife with bugs, obviously rushed, and would be considered garbage by most, but no amount of critical thrashing will ever change my opinion on them because my enjoyment is based on what I personally value in a game. And what the countless comments of people stating that they're sick of those thrashing Nintendo fail to understand about their persistent online presence defending the company is this: if the games are so good, then why aren't you playing them? If your enjoyment suffers because of the opinions of other people, question whether you truly enjoy what you're playing. And if you feel the need to constantly defend a game rather than letting it speak for itself, that's indicative of how little entertainment value comes from the actual game you've been hyping up this whole time. Look, you wouldn't be getting recommended channels of people roasting influencers for being apologists for a company if the products they were defending weren't so blatantly awful and legions of people with similar taste to you didn't resonate with the message. I get comments asking why I don't cover Xbox and PlayStation on this channel, which I have, I just don't cover them as much as Nintendo, and that's because I don't care about Xbox and PlayStation. The reason why I didn't care is because they've been doing for years what Nintendo's only started doing now. I heard a concerning amount of fans say, well, Xbox and PlayStation have been doing it for years, as if that's somehow a valid excuse for Nintendo's actions, while conveniently ignoring how that's a terrible excuse because we like Nintendo because they were different from those two. Like, who decided that we're just gonna be on board with Nintendo adopting industry trends from Sony and Microsoft, which have been proven to make the companies worse? Do you hear how ridiculous that sounds? It makes no sense, and I can't believe people unironically see that as some sort of gotcha to excuse Nintendo's behavior. If you see any quote-unquote fans who are complicit in Nintendo's transformation into the very companies we make fun of, call into question whether they themselves are even a Nintendo fan, especially whenever it's a Nintendo profile picture, but especially when it's a default profile picture. And that's just the comments. The influencers are even worse. Between the constant clickbait, FOMO, speculation, fake leaks, and hype farming, all to be met with overpriced disappointment, honestly, the way I look at Nintendo fans and influencers now is the way I look at crypto bros trying to sell NFTs and meme coins. They even have the same overly smug attitude about it. And I've been using the term fan quite loosely to describe these people because what I consider a fan of a franchise in 2015 is a far cry from what Nintendo's quote-unquote fans are doing, because this is what I consider loyalist behavior. I mean, it sounds absolutely exhausting being in a constant cycle of wait for the red, get hyped, buy product, call product, masterpiece, defend corporation, wait for the red, get hyped, buy product, call product, masterpiece, defend corporation. Like, do you even play the games? More importantly, do you even enjoy the games? If so, I don't believe you because A, the aforementioned validation that you demand for every game that releases, and B, there's way too many of you calling the old games garbage or unplayable rather than at least appreciating what they did for the franchise, which is outright baffling considering how much the company banks on nostalgia, hence why I don't consider this to be fan behavior. I saw one comment that said they couldn't get into 3D Mario until Odyssey released. And like, that makes you an Odyssey fan, not a 3D Mario fan. Yet these are the kinds of people who are defending Nintendo's downfall the hardest. And I can't believe I'm breaking them up again, but Nintendo's fans are worse than Sonic fans at this point. Because not only are they allowed to make fan games without getting sued, but as toxic as they can be, one thing they've always done is demand quality from the company. And as far as I'm concerned, the franchise's reputation has done a complete 180 from the 2010s. In order for Nintendo fans to be happy now, that means defending the brand even if the quality of the product suffers. It means saying it's not that bad when it's clearly exactly that bad, and it means accepting less because thousands have been convinced that criticism equals betrayal, but the truth is that loyalty without standards isn't fandom, that's allegiance. I've never really been on board with the whole step in the right direction argument, at least for large companies. Given the amount of resources they have, each game should be an innovative step at the most, or refine the foundation set by its predecessor at the least. Paying full price for a game that hardly improves on the last title or doesn't maintain the same level of quality while excusing it as a step in the right direction, or worse, using the "at least we got a game" excuse is an absolute joke to me. I wasn't even planning on making a video covering Pokémon ZA, but Nintendo makes it too easy. This company has been in the business of selling video games for over 40 years, and now they can't even have a single announcement without it being mired in controversy. The pricing is one thing, but the quality of Nintendo's games have never been this consistently poor, even on their least successful consoles. And this is a topic for another day, but I'm almost certain that the executives at Nintendo predicted that the pricing controversy would have subsided by now, because historically, that's how it's always happened. A new terrible practice is introduced to the industry, people complain about it for like a week, maybe a month, then everyone moves on either to the next controversy or a new game is announced to distract from the backlash. Alternatively, a new terrible practice is introduced to the industry, there's a ton of backlash, and the company backtracks, but not really, because the goal was to simply push the envelope further. I'm entirely convinced that the $80 price tag was a Trojan horse for $70 games, so when $70 becomes the norm, people will argue that it's at least better than the $80 they were being asked originally. That hasn't happened this time. People outright rejected the $80 price tag, but there's been a lot more pushback to the $70 price tag than even I was expecting. To those who haven't been following the gaming community that much, having a controversy last for this long is unusual behavior. I have my theory as to why the pushback has been so strong, which yes includes unaffordability, but there's some other factors at play here, and I just need to watch how things go for just a bit longer before I say anything definitive. But those are my thoughts on this subject, and I'm interested in hearing your thoughts as well. So feel free to comment those down below, leave a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe to see the next post as soon as it goes live. Alright, take care.